Hello. Let's get the program started here. I want to say welcome to everybody to the first presentation of the 2026 EAC. We have a presentation from Bill Eckberg, and Bill's background, he lives in Florida now. He was in Indianapolis and he ran a convention there. He's a biology professor, and then he was the department chair, and then he was the dean at Howard, and until he retired in about 2009, and I hope he just went full-time coin. But this somewhat explains his demeanor, but more his penchant for organization and classification. I mean, if you're a biologist, everything's in a phylum, right? He's what I would call our resident research department. Quite the investigator, and he has some of his own methods. Speaking of, he had a recent debunking of the Sheldon chain scent emission sequence using a term that I called silhouette overlays, and I could barely say it, but he did a marvelous job with that. He's a prolific author and speaker. Recent book on half cents. I've got a nice copy of that, America's Greatest Little Coin. Past chair of multiple EAC conventions. He a past EAC president and a past regional chair. Bill's going to give a talk today on Robert Scot's signature. So please welcome Bill Eckberg.
Thank you. Sounds like I must be very, very old, and I guess it's true. I am. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I hope that we'll learn something here today together. I want to start by talking about research and what you have to do if you really want to do good research. You have to start by making your conclusions based on evidence. You don't ever want to start out with the preconceived idea of what you're going to find. Too many people, particularly in numismatics, start with their conclusion and then they try to get data that proves it. That's absolutely backwards. You don't want to do it that way. Second thing is the coins can never lie or be mistaken. Coins are facts. They cannot be wrong. It's up to us to try to understand what the coins are telling us, but the coins are never wrong. Contemporary records, we're not going to talk much in this talk about contemporary records, but contemporary records that are primary sources are much more reliable than later copies or summaries because errors creep into official documents as records are copied or memories are relied upon. And I also want you to keep in mind that nothing previously known is necessarily correct, okay? Nothing that you know is necessarily correct. Articles, books, and so on may have incorrect information. Crosby, Sheldon, Breen, Noyes, the Red Book, my book, none of those are primary sources. And in the science and medical professions, we call quoting that kind of information eminence-based research as opposed to evidence-based research. And one is much better than the other. Evidence-based is much better. Walter Breen has shaped our thinking about Robert Scot. He certainly shaped mine originally. I'm going to give you some quotes from Breen about Scot and tell you a little bit about that. The first one is that he was out of his depth and feared replacement by a competitor. He didn't have competitors, okay? He never had a competitor. He had assistants, he had helpers, but he didn't have competitors. He was considered the best engraver in the United States at the time, and that's why they hired him. Breen said he did not use original dyes, matrices, what we now call, original dyes, what we did not call, what we now call master dyes, I'm sorry. Said he did not use those. Not true. He used them at least by 1795, and he used them for the large sense at least in 1794. So Breen is mistaken. Also said Scot had failing eyesight by 1807, which he said was why they hired John Reich. Again, not true. His eyesight never did fail, and he served as engraver for another 16 years after 1807, and he only gave up the job because he died. So, so none of these things that Breen said, I don't know why Breen had a burr in his saddle about Robert Scott, but he obviously did. And so you can listen to Walter Breen about a lot of things, but not about this, okay? Breen says he was a hack. Do you believe the guy that made this had talent? Was this guy a hack? I don't think so. I think this is one of the most beautiful coins that the United States has ever produced. The Drake bust dollar design. This also happens to be quite possibly the finest known Drake bust dollar, at least small eagle Drake bust dollar. And it was owned by a good friend of ours, Tettenhorst, okay, who was a prominent half-cent guy. But he used to own this coin. But look at the detail in the eagle. Look at the beautiful engraving, the very sensitive engraving of the face and the bust and the hair. This was not done by somebody who had any fear of competition, or at least he shouldn't have. So there have been a couple of recent works about Scot I want to call your attention to. This one is by Bill Nyberg. It's about sort of the entire life and work of Robert Scott, and it's very good, and I recommend it if you want to learn more about this guy. And you can order this. That's advertised in every issue of Pennywise. I'm not getting a kickback for it. I have nothing to do with the book, but I strongly recommend it. On the other hand, this was Red Book Quarterly from last fall. It was interesting to see the prices of gold and silver at that time, because they were way different than they are now. But Engraving a Nation, Robert Scott's Drake bust, how Robert Scott's Drake bust defined America's coinage. Well, I thought this was going to be a great article, and I thought, oh, I better read this. And so I went out and got a copy, and I got home, and it's a very superficial description of the Drake bust half-cent varieties that are listed in the Red Book. And that's all it was. So it looks like it's going to be really important. It's not. But Nyberg's book is very good. So let's talk about his background for a minute. He was born October 2, 1745 in Canongate, Scotland. That is a suburb of Edinburgh. Attended the University of Edinburgh. Became a watchmaker and copperplate engraver. And he was heavily influenced by the Scottish Enlightenment. And some of the major thinkers were David Hume, Adam Smith, Adam Ferguson, and a number of others. But these were the main figures of the Enlightenment in Europe, and they also very much influenced American thinkers such as Thomas Jefferson. And he was heavily influenced by them. His engraving technique, once again, will show you how skilled he really was. Most artists who want to make an engraving do a drawing, and then they transfer the drawing to the plate, and then they carefully engrave. He just drew the design directly on the plate with a needle. He was very confident, he was very skilled, he knew what he was doing. He also printed most of his own engravings. Most people in those days sent the plates out to have somebody else do the dirty work. And he never signed any of his plates. You can learn a lot more about what he did in engraving from Nyberg's book. He moved to Virginia in 1774, so he was about 29 years old, not a kid. Changed his name to Scot with one T. He was born Robert Scott with two T's. Engraved paper currency for Virginia. Strongly, whoops, I'm too far. Let's go back. Sorry about that. Moved to Fredericksburg in 1774. Changed his name to Scott with one T. Engraved paper currency for Virginia. Became closely acquainted with Jefferson and Washington. And he became closely acquainted with them because he was reputed to be the best engraver in the colonies at that time. What is going on here? and he strongly supported the American Revolution. Probably because he was a Scot, he probably always hated those usurpers from the South. and but he strongly supported the revolution. So here's his Virginia note from May 6th of 1776. It's not a wonderful example, but it's one of the best ones I could find on the internet. The lettering is gorgeous. And remember, he engraves everything backwards, because all of the work you do on an engraving plate is backwards, okay? And I want to focus in a little bit on the design in the corner. It says N. Virginia Quartown. Anybody know what that means? N. Virginia Quartown? Virginia gives the fourth, okay? The fourth part of the English realm. What are the other three? Somebody be brave.
He's got the math.
What?
England, Scotland, Ireland.
England, Scotland, and Ireland. Wait, well, that's two of. That's part of two of them.
Ireland and Wales.
England, Wales, and Scotland is one part. Ireland is another. France is the third, and Virginia is the fourth. On the bottom right is England, Scotland, and Wales. On the bottom left is Ireland. Top right is France. Excuse me. And the top left is Virginia. So what happened about 2 weeks after this came out in early May? Well, Virginia sent their resolves to Congress, and the Virginia resolves recommended independence. So the next emission, excuse me, of Virginia paper money came out in October, and it's no longer in shillings and pounds, it's now in Spanish dollars. And the vignette in the corner is quite different. It's got Minerva standing on the back of the King of England, who's got in his right hand a club, in his left hand he's got chains that are broken, and his crown has fallen off in front of him. And the motto, which is still the motto of Virginia today, Sic Semper Tyrannis, always this always to tyrants. So this is post-revolution. Didn't take long. He also engraved this in 1780. It's an Indian peace medal that was made for Thomas Jefferson when he was governor of Virginia. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God, in case you wondered how Scott really felt, okay? Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. And on the reverse, happy while united, has a Native American and a colonial American sitting on a bench smoking a pipe of peace together. Very lovely. So he moved to Philadelphia in 1781, set up an engraving shop, married Eunice Beale in 1783. They had 4 daughters and a son. And that's all I'm going to say about his personal life. He engraved this map of the Yorktown battlefield. The original drawings for the map were done in the days after the battle, so it was a very accurate map. And I want to thank the Society of the Cincinnati and Bob Fagley for getting me a high-resolution copy of this, an image of a high-resolution copy of this, I should say. We'll zoom in on the town itself. I'm sorry about my voice. The English are shown in red, the French in yellow, the Americans in blue. The yellow down near the bottom are the siege lines that the French had. The blue next to it, between that and the river, are the American siege lines. All the ships in the harbor, if they look like they're in bad shape, they are. They were sunk and burned by the British to keep the French from sending Marines ashore. Okay, so they mined their harbor, so so nobody could attack them from the water. What I really want to show you is a little bit of the bottom of this map, because this is a piece of what is written at the bottom, which is the direct, which is how the map was organized and what exactly was going on at each point. And I want you to know that all of this was engraved backwards, okay? The man knew what he was doing. And he signed it on the bottom. He also engraved the Great Seal of the United States. This is the first one. It's still in existence. And it was first used by Washington to exchange prisoners. This is the famous La Mature painting of the Mint. Nothing whatsoever like the Mint looked like. Looks like this beautiful bucolic area, big parks around, walking paths, and so on. This is what it really looked like. It was two townhouses with two other buildings on either side stuck to it. The middle door does not actually go into the building. It goes into the courtyard behind it. So the two doors go into each side of the townhouse. The middle door, just you walk through into the courtyard out back. And this was painted, and the next one was painted by Pete Smith of EAC. You can get an idea of how crowded that area was, okay? Wasn't anything like the La Mature painting. So here are the Mint's first coins, all of them by Henry Voigt. I've talked about these before, and I'm not going to say much about them today, but I've tried to get at least among the highest grade coins to show in this talk, and little eye candy there. Again, all these were engraved by Henry Voigt. Scot was not yet employed by the Mint when these were coined. So what do we mean by Scot's signature? Mint engravers did not sign their creations before Gobrecht in 1836, and he got in all kinds of trouble for it. So Scot did not sign his dies. So what do I mean by Scot's signature? And I mean design motifs carried through different designs over the years. In other words, you have to identify his signature by his work, not by looking at what he wrote. Common stylistic elements. It's a standard activity in art study. Do you recognize this artist's work? Do you have a copy of it in your billfold? You probably do, because this is the image that was copied for the dollar bill. Gilbert Stuart. Gilbert Stuart was certainly the best American portrait artist of that era. I usually don't have this much trouble coughing. Sorry. But look at his eyes, look at Washington's eyes. Stuart was wonderful at capturing people's psychology. He just looks tired. He just looks like looks like he really would rather not be president anymore. And by 1796, that was the case. He really didn't want to be president anymore. Look at his cheeks. You can see the muscles of his cheeks, right? That are clenched because he's holding his false teeth together because they were operated by springs which kept opening them. So he had to hold his mouth closed at all times, and it was very uncomfortable, very painful. And Washington just does not look like a happy guy here, does he? Here's another painting by Gilbert Stuart. I've just picked this as a guy that happened to be a wine merchant in Boston. But look at his eyes. He's kind of looking up at you. Would you buy a used car from this guy? You probably wouldn't, right? And he's captured that. He's captured that. And most artists of the time would not have been able to get that. And just to give fair duty to the women, This is a portrait of a woman. Look at her for a second. Her right eye is arched. Her eyebrow is arched. I can't do that. She's got a sly little smile on. She's flirting with him. And he was the kind of guy that liked that. He, when he painted your portrait, he would sit there and get drunk. Hopefully you would get drunk too. And then he would take the portrait half finished, take your money, and then go away and then sell the painting to somebody else. He was a fabulous painter, but a horrible, horrible human being. Okay? People still went to him because he was such a good painter, but he was a horrible human being. How about this artist's work? Is that as good? No, it isn't, is it? It's really flat. Doesn't even really look like Washington, does it? Not if you believe other things. Well, this is by Joseph Wright. Joseph Wright is the guy that, Walter Breen and others think designed the Liberty Cap half cent, the 1793 Liberty Cap half cent. And Joseph Wright, as you can see here, was really a third-rate painter. He was not the master that people who love Liberty Caps have made him out to be. He did not have anything to do with the Liberty Caps. He had nothing to do with it. In coinage, how about this artist's work? Anybody recognize Charles Barber? Look at the faces are very similar, the necks are very similar, the hair is all tied up very, very neatly in every case. Generally, to my mind, not a very interesting design, okay? Your results may differ. I'm not a big fan of Charles Barber's work, but he definitely has a style. You can recognize Barber's work. So these are stylistic clues by which we recognize works by artists. And so let's talk about Scot. Let's talk about the designs that were produced while Scot was engraver first. 1794, flowing hair and Liberty Caps. Cent, half cent, dollar, half dollar, and half dime were the only ones made in 1794. They were all by Scot. He engraved them all, but they weren't his original designs. They weren't his original designs. Well, where did the designs come from? We know. Here's his head of 94. Here's Voigt's head of 93. And if we do an overlay, they're exactly the same. The only difference is there's been a lot more engraving of the hair in the head of 94. For many decades, people said, and Sheldon always said, he never agreed that this wasn't true. Everybody said that all of the 94s were individually engraved, but they used a hub for all of them, and then just played with the hair after that. So, head of 94 is actually designed from Voigt. How about Scott's flowing hair? Here's the dollar. Not a bad example of that. Here's a Liberty Cap cent, and if you overlay those, you find that Scot directly copied the Liberty Cap cent for the dollar. They're different sizes, but he directly copied the design. It's exactly the same, from the hairline, forehead, eye, nose, mouth, chin, throat, even the lower part of the bust line, even the lowest lock of the hair is the same, okay? So the dollar, the 1794 dollar was copied from the 1793 Liberty Cap cent. Even I was surprised. Okay, drape bust designs. 1795 saw the dollar and the eagle, and 1796 saw everything else except the half cent, and 1800 the half cent finally came along. All of these were original to Scot. The next group, which has been a little bit controversial, the cap bust and classic head designs. Some people say these were not designed by Scot, or at least some of them were not designed by Scot. We'll talk about that in a moment. One thing that's always important to point out is that the half dollar and the half eagle were considered the artist's fat mistress. Okay, that's not John Reich though. Don't say John Reich. And the matron head design. We're going to see a bunch of matron heads in the auction tomorrow night. What did Walter Breen say about it? Spectacularly ugly. Do we agree? Mabel Ann, you don't agree, do you? I don't agree either. William Sheldon said, looks like an obese ward boss. I don't even know what an obese ward boss would look like, but probably not that. And here's another quote from Breen, a characterless slattern. Anybody know what a slattern is? I had to look it up. What's a slattern?
The loose woman. Yeah.
Actually, that's what I thought. It's actually an unkempt woman, a sloppy woman. Yeah. I thought it would be a loose woman too.
Yeah.
Again, obviously Sheldon and Breen didn't care for this design. I know John Wright would disagree completely, and Mabel Ann, you're there, so good for you. So let's talk about common elements. If we look at common elements between the drape busts, there are many. And we can start by saying they have a drapery. We can start by saying that Liberty has long flowing hair in waves that goes down below her shoulder. Can say that she has a little, I don't know what you call it, at her forehead, hair at her forehead. She's got ringlets in front of her ear, okay? And that's the same in the copper as in the silver, okay? Same in the copper and silver. These are not the same design, however. If you tried to do an overlay of these two, they don't match at all. They're just similar motifs. And another similar motif would be the gold coin, and this is the gold eagle. Once again, she's got a drape bust. She's got long flowing hair in waves down below her shoulder. She's got stuff at her forehead. She's got the ringlets in front of her ear. And although I didn't mention it last time, they both have ringlets or waves at the neck, okay? Ringlets or waves at the neck. So here's the next one. Basically, he's just flipped the drape bust over, okay? He's just basically flipped the design over and put a Liberty cap on Liberty's head. But all of the other elements are the same. Got the hair at the forehead, got the hair in front of the ear, the long waves behind her back, got the curls at the shoulder and the neck. Again, the same elements are present here. And here's the copper version. The drapery is gone, but everything else is still there, okay? The drapery's gone, but everything else is still there. So in other words, these common elements tell us that this work was all done by the same man, okay? This tells us that the work was done by the same man. And just to show a little bit of everything, these are ones that we've already looked at, and down here is the half eagle, the later cent, another later half eagle, the matron head, and the 1821 quarter eagle, which was the last new die that Scot made before his death. He died in 23, and the last new design he made during his career was 1821. So he was aging at that point, and that one is not quite as nicely designed as his earlier ones, but he was still engraving until then. So what is Scot's signature? What is Scot's signature? First, curls in front of the ear, waves and curls at the back of the neck, curls at the neck. In other words, are there other signatures? People have talked about these notched stars and engraved clasps on the cap bust, silver and gold, as proving that that's the work I blocked his name now.
The Brad.
John, yes, John Reich, Johann Matthaus Reich. Anyway, the notched stars are found only on the gold and silver coins. They're not found on the copper coins. It's always the 13th star, and it's always the notch always points to the periphery of the coin. You can see that in these two on the top. You can see that the notches are not present on the copper coins below. Those would be not part of the actual design. The stars were punched in separately along with the lettering. So they may be, if they are a signature of Reich, they would be a signature that he made the die. It wouldn't be a signature that he made the design. And these engraved clasps, everybody decided that that looked like a script J. Well, it doesn't look like a script J, and it especially doesn't look like what a script J looked like in the early 1800s, okay? It looks more like, but not really like, a script Q or the number 2, okay? So you cannot claim that that is John Reich's signature. Again, these are not design features. They might identify who sank the die, but they are not part of the design. So Liberty's hair was Scot's signature. Liberty's hair. Are you convinced? Is anybody convinced? Is anybody unconvinced? Okay, quiet group. And as Steve Jobs used to say, one more thing. And unfortunately, John isn't here because I'm going to show the origin of the matron head cent design. Where did that come from? Here's the matron head cent. Here it's overlaid with another coin, another earlier coin. And once again, the faces, the necks, the throats, the entire bust line, everything is exactly the same, except the other version has a liberty cap because the other version is a half eagle. So the matron head cent was copied directly from the half eagle. So if she is a characterless slattern, so is the cap bust half eagle. And I have not heard anyone describe any of the gold coins in that way. Any questions? Everything makes sense, huh?
Were those punches, or was each,
What do you mean?
like, would Scott have the bust punch and then be able to add the hair afterwards, or was he just stopping the design correctly?
Oh, you mean copying from
Like from the coin?
yeah, they started with hubs, okay? They made hubs in 1793. So what he did with the 1793 hub to make the 1794s is he put that into a die and made that his master die, and then he worked it in the master die and then made working dies from that. Yeah. Yeah.
So why was in the large set series? Why is there a matron head? But in the half sets, we just go straight from draped bust to classic head to braided hair. Why is it sort of like inserting nowhere or out of nowhere into the?
Probably because they weren't making half cents when the matron head came out in 1816. Half cents had been basically put aside. Yeah, paused. That's a good word. In 1811, and I don't know when Nice became the engraver. When they started making half cents again, he just basically went from Scott's design.
But the classic head half cent started 1809.
Correct.
And what year did the matron head start in the large set series?
1816.
So, and then the classic heads followed in the large set, right? Or were they first? We were 1809, 1811.
Oh, no, the classic had large cents were 1808 to 1814. Okay?
Right.
And the last ones were minted actually in 1816 because they had no new dies yet. The new dies hadn't been prepared.
And then when they went back to striking half cents in 1825, we still had classic head.
That's right. Yeah.
We had matron head design.
I guess Nice didn't want to create a new master die. I could only speculate, but that makes sense. Somebody else? Yeah.
My question was, like how did the engravers master that amazing ability to be able to do it backwards? Is that just practice, or was there a special training module they did, or how was that?
It's practice. Yeah. You have to get used to and good at thinking in a mirror. Okay. Yeah, that's something that people don't think about when you see an engraving with such detail as the one that I showed. You have to keep in mind that all of that was done backwards. It's like Ginger Rogers said, she did everything that Fred Astaire did, but she did it backwards in high heels. So
Where they could dance, couldn't they?
they could dance, yes. Anybody else? Well, thank you for your attention.